The grandfather clock's pendulum sliced through the silence of the dimly lit library, each swing marking another moment of eternity. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long, silvery fingers across leather-bound volumes that lined the walls from floor to ceiling. The air hung heavy with the scent of aged paper and sandalwood, tinged with the metallic undertone that only Nathaniel could detect, the lingering aroma of the blood he'd consumed hours earlier. Nathaniel Whitaker sat motionless in his wingback chair, the leather creaking softly beneath his weight as he turned another page of his first edition Shelley. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers, casting a faint orange glow that barely touched the pallor of his skin. He felt the warmth from across the room, a sensation more remembered than experienced, like so many things these days. His fingers, unnaturally pale against the yellowed pages, traced the words he'd read 100 times before. The house settled around him with familiar groans and whispers, a symphony of age that matched his own, though the mansion's centuries paled in comparison to his. The distant sound of rain beginning to patter against the windows drew his attention. Nathaniel lifted his head, inhaling deeply through nostrils that detected far more than moisture in the air. There was a storm coming, electrical and raw. His skin prickled with the change in atmospheric pressure, a sensation that remained despite the centuries that had dulled so many others. He closed the book without marking his place. He would remember exactly where he'd left off, as he remembered everything. Rising from the chair with fluid grace that belied his apparent age, Nathaniel moved to the window. The garden below glistened wetly in the moonlight, roses nodding their heavy heads under the increasing downpour. Something caught his eye, a flicker of movement at the edge of his property where the wrought iron fence met the public park beyond. Nathaniel's pupils dilated, adjusting instantly to focus on the small figure huddled beneath the sprawling oak tree. A child, no more than 10, shoulders hunched against the rain, clutching something to her chest. His throat tightened with an unfamiliar sensation. Hunger. No, something else. Something he hadn't felt in... How long had it been? Concern. The rain fell in earnest now, drumming against Nathaniel's umbrella as he approached the child. His footsteps were nearly silent on the sodden grass, but she sensed him anyway, head snapping up with the wariness of prey. A girl, thin face smudged with dirt, hair plastered to her skull by the downpour. She clutched a bicycle chain in her small hands, the metal links leaving rust stains on her fingers. Behind her leaned the remains of what had once been a child's bicycle, now missing its wheels and seat. "You're on my property," Nathaniel said, his voice softer than intended. It had been decades since he'd spoken to a child. The girl's eyes widened, reflecting the distant street lamp. She smelled of wet wool and fear, but beneath that, a curious determination. "I didn't steal anything," she said, voice steady despite her shivering. "I was just fixing my bike." Nathaniel glanced at the skeletal frame behind her. "That doesn't look particularly fixable." "I can fix anything," she replied, chin jutting upward. "I just needed somewhere dry to work." A raindrop slid from the umbrella's edge, landing on Nathaniel's hand. He felt its coolness with detached interest. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, weighing stranger danger against the reality of being caught trespassing. "Abigail," she finally answered. "Abigail Mitchell." "Where are your parents?" "Abigail Mitchell." Her small shoulders stiffened. "My mom's working. Night shift." The lie hung between them, transparent as glass. Nathaniel detected the sour note of falsehood in her scent, mixed with hunger and exhaustion. "And she knows you're out here in the rain at..." He checked his watch. 11:37 at night? Abigail's fingers tightened around the chain. I told you, I'm fixing my bike. So you did. Nathaniel tilted his head, studying her. The cold couldn't harm him, but the child's lips were turning blue. You're freezing. I'm fine. Her teeth chattered, betraying her words. Something stirred in Nathaniel's chest, a sensation so long dormant he almost didn't recognize it. Empathy, perhaps, or memory of another child centuries ago who had also insisted she was fine while dying of cold. I have tools, he heard himself say, in my workshop, and it's dry. Suspicion flared in Abigail's eyes. I'm not supposed to go with strangers. Wise policy. Nathaniel extended the umbrella over her without stepping closer. I'm Nathaniel Whitaker. I own that house. He gestured toward the mansion looming behind them. You may use my workshop to repair your bicycle, and then you should return home. Abigail glanced between the ruined bike and the grand house, calculation clear in her expression. You got food in there too? Nathaniel's lips twitched. I imagine I could find something suitable. She stood, gathering the bicycle chain and hoisting the frame with surprising strength. Okay, Mr. Whitaker, but I'm keeping my phone out, and I know how to call 911. I would expect nothing less. Nathaniel watched as Abigail devoured her third peanut butter sandwich, crumbs falling onto the ancient marble countertop. Her small feet dangled from the bar stool, occasionally kicking against the wood in a rhythm that matched her chewing. The kitchen, rarely used except by his housekeeper during daylight hours, smelled of dust and disuse beneath the fresh scent of bread and peanut butter. Nathaniel had fumbled through the cabinets, finding supplies with the awkwardness of someone who hadn't prepared food in decades. You live here all alone? Abigail asked, voice muffled by bread. Yes. Nathaniel leaned against the counter, maintaining a careful distance. It's huge. Her eyes roamed the high ceilings, the copper pots hanging unused above the professional stove. You must be super rich. I have sufficient resources. Abigail swallowed her last bite, then licked peanut butter from her fingers with unself-conscious thoroughness. So where's your workshop? For my bike? Nathaniel hesitated. The basement workshop contained tools, yes, but also items not meant for human eyes. Perhaps tomorrow would be better. It's late and you should... I told you, my mom's working. Abigail's voice hardened with practiced defiance. I can't go home yet. Then call her. Tell her where you are. The girl's eyes dropped to the empty plate. Her fingers curled around the edge of the stool, knuckles whitening. Can't. My phone's dead. Another lie. Nathaniel could hear her heartbeat accelerate, smell the anxiety rising from her skin like steam. He should call the authorities. A child, alone at night, obviously homeless or neglected. It wasn't his concern. He had maintained his existence for centuries by avoiding precisely these entanglements. And yet... You may use my phone, he offered, sliding his cell across the counter. Abigail stared at it without reaching. What's the catch? Pardon? Nobody just helps. What do you want? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that made Nathaniel's stomach clench with distaste. I want nothing from you, Abigail, except perhaps honesty. Her eyes met his, searching for deception. Whatever she saw made her shoulders slump. My mom's not working, she admitted. She's gone for a while. How long is a while? 3 weeks. Abigail's voice was barely audible. She said she'd be back, but... And you've been alone all this time? She nodded, a quick jerk of her chin. I'm okay, though. I know how to take care of myself." Nathaniel felt something ancient and protective unfurl within him, a sensation both foreign and achingly familiar. "Clearly," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "However, I cannot in good conscience allow a child to wander the streets at night." Fear flashed across Abigail's face. "You're gonna call social services? That would be the responsible course of action." "Please don't." Her voice cracked. "They'll put me in the system. My mom will come back. She always does." Nathaniel studied her face, the stubborn set of her jaw, the desperate hope in her eyes. He recognized that hope, had felt it himself, waiting for his own family's return centuries ago, before he understood that death was permanent for everyone except him. One night, he heard himself say, "You may stay here tonight. In the morning, we will reassess the situation." Relief washed over Abigail's features. "For real?" "For real," Nathaniel echoed, the modern phrase feeling strange on his tongue. "But there are rules. You will stay in the guest room. You will not wander the house. And tomorrow, we will contact the appropriate authorities." Abigail's face fell at the last condition, but she nodded. "Can I at least fix my bike first? Before tomorrow?" "We'll see." Nathaniel gestured toward the hallway. "The guest room is this way." Sunlight streamed through a gap in the heavy curtains, painting a golden stripe across Abigail's sleeping face. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, safely in shadow, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest beneath the covers. She had burrowed deep into the feather mattress, only the top of her head visible, hair splayed across the pillow like dark seaweed. The room smelled of child, a warm, living scent that had not permeated these walls in over a century. Beneath it lingered the mustiness of disuse and the lavender sachets his housekeeper insisted on placing in every drawer. Nathaniel's fingers tightened around the doorframe. He should have called the authorities last night, should never have brought her into his home. The risk was too great, not to her, but to the careful isolation he had cultivated. Abigail stirred, mumbling something in her sleep. Her small hand emerged from the covers, reaching for something that wasn't there. The vulnerability of the gesture made Nathaniel's chest ache with an emotion he couldn't name. He retreated silently, closing the door with barely a click. "You don't have any cereal?" Abigail stood on tiptoe, peering into Nathaniel's barren cupboards. She had dressed in the same clothes as yesterday, though she'd clearly attempted to smooth the wrinkles. "I don't typically eat breakfast," Nathaniel replied from his position by the window, where the heavy drapes allowed him to stand without risking direct sunlight. "There might be oatmeal." Abigail made a face. "Gross." She continued her exploration, opening the refrigerator to reveal its equally sparse contents. "Don't you eat anything?" "I have dietary restrictions." "Like gluten-free? My friend Zoe can't have gluten. Her face gets all puffy." Abigail demonstrated with her cheeks. "Something like that." Nathaniel checked his watch. "We should discuss your situation." Abigail's shoulders tensed immediately. She closed the refrigerator door with deliberate care. "I told you, my mom's coming back. And in the meantime, I'm fine on my own. You were sleeping under a tree in the rain." Abigail scowled. "Not usually. I have a place. I just got locked out." Another lie. Nathaniel could smell the falsehood, but also the genuine fear beneath it. "Abigail, can we go to the park first?" she interrupted, words tumbling out in a rush. "Before you call anyone? Just for a little while? Please?" Nathaniel hesitated. The park was dangerous for him in daylight, but there were shaded paths, and delaying the inevitable call to child services would only make things more difficult. Yet he found himself nodding, for a short time. Relief flooded Abigail's face. And maybe you could pretend to be my dad? Just for today? The request hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. What? It's just... Abigail looked down at her scuffed sneakers. There's this social worker, Kimberly Grant. She comes to the park sometimes, asks questions. If she sees me alone again, she'll definitely call it in. But if I'm with my dad... You want me to impersonate your father to deceive a social worker? Nathaniel's voice rose with incredulity. Just for today, Abigail repeated, gaze lifting to meet his. Please? I've never had a dad before. Not even for pretend. Something in her expression, hopeful yet resigned, as if already anticipating rejection, stirred memories Nathaniel had buried centuries ago. Of his own sister, Rebecca, asking him to play make-believe, of family bonds severed by time and his own cursed existence. Abigail, he began, uncertain what he would say next. The weight of years pressed down on him, reminding him of all the reasons he kept humans at a distance. Attachment led to loss, always. And yet, this child looked at him with such naked hope, as if he, Nathaniel Whitaker, vampire king of the eastern seaboard, could be something as simple and human as a father for a day. Please, Abigail whispered. I won't ask for anything else, I promise. Nathaniel felt something shift inside him, like ice breaking on a frozen river. When he spoke, his voice emerged rough with emotion he'd thought long dead. One day, that's all. And then we must address your situation properly. Abigail's face lit with a smile so brilliant it almost hurt to witness. Really? You'll do it? Against my better judgment, Nathaniel murmured. But yes, I'll... The words died in his throat as Abigail launched herself forward, thin arms wrapping around his waist in an impulsive hug. The contact sent a shock through his system. The warmth of her, the rapid flutter of her heartbeat against his cold skin, the trust implicit in the gesture. For a moment, Nathaniel stood frozen, hands hovering uncertainly above her shoulders. Then, slowly, he allowed one hand to rest lightly on her head, feeling the silky texture of her hair beneath his palm. Thank you, Abigail whispered against his shirt. Dad. The word echoed in Nathaniel's chest, awakening hunger, not for blood, but for something he'd denied himself far longer. Connection, family, belonging. And in that moment, something ancient and dormant within him began to stir. A feeling he had buried centuries ago. Nathaniel's arms, once rigid with shock, gently closed around the child's small frame. He allowed himself this moment of vulnerability, this dangerous spark of hope. We should, his voice faltered. We should get you something to eat. Abigail pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm not really hungry. Nevertheless, Nathaniel said, regaining his composure. Children require regular sustenance. It's nearly dusk. An appropriate time for dinner. He led her through the mansion's shadowy corridors, past oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors who had never truly been his blood relations. The portraits had come with the estate when he'd acquired it in 1897, a convenient fiction to maintain his human facade. Now, Abigail's curious gaze swept over them. Are these your grandpas and grandmas? She asked, her sneakers squeaking against the polished hardwood. In a manner of speaking, Nathaniel replied carefully. Family is complicated for me. The kitchen, a vast modernized space that saw little use, gleamed with stainless steel appliances and marble countertops. Nathaniel opened the refrigerator, surveying its sparse contents with a frown. A few blood bags were concealed in an opaque container at the back, but the human food supply was woefully inadequate. "I'm afraid I don't entertain children often," he admitted. "Perhaps we could order something?" Abigail climbed onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island, her feet dangling. "Pizza, with extra cheese? Is that your preference?" When she nodded enthusiastically, Nathaniel retrieved his phone. "Pizza it shall be." While they waited, Nathaniel poured Abigail a glass of orange juice, one of the few suitable beverages he kept on hand for his attorney's occasional visits. She drank it greedily, leaving a bright orange mustache above her lip that she wiped away with her sleeve. "So," Nathaniel began, leaning against the counter. "How did you find me, Abigail? This house is quite isolated." She traced patterns in the condensation on her glass. "I saw you once. In the city. You were getting out of your car, and I thought you looked—" She hesitated. "Safe. I followed you, but I lost you. Then I found an old newspaper with your picture. It said Whitaker Estate, so I asked people until someone told me where it was." "That's quite resourceful," Nathaniel said, unsettled by how easily she'd tracked him. "But dangerous. Very dangerous." "I didn't have anywhere else to go," she whispered. The doorbell chimed, saving him from responding. Nathaniel paid the delivery person, tipping generously to compensate for the mansion's remote location, and returned with the steaming box. As Abigail devoured her first slice, Nathaniel watched her with growing concern. The way she ate, quickly, almost desperately, spoke of someone accustomed to having food taken away. Her clothes, though not filthy, showed signs of repeated washing and mending. The backpack she'd arrived with was stuffed to bursting. "Abigail," he said gently, "where is your mother?" The girl stiffened, pizza halfway to her mouth. "She's away." "Away where?" "Just away." Abigail took another bite, chewing slowly. "She said she'd come back, but it's been a long time now." Nathaniel felt a familiar anger stirring, the kind that, in centuries past, had led to swift and terrible justice. "How long?" 63 days, Abigail answered promptly. "I counted." 2 months. A child, alone, for 2 months. Nathaniel's fingers curled into fists beneath the counter. "And where have you been staying these 63 days? Abigail's eyes dropped to her plate. "Different places. Sometimes the library until it closes. Sometimes the park. There's a lady at the shelter who lets me stay sometimes. But there are rules about kids without grown-ups." Each word twisted something in Nathaniel's chest. He'd witnessed countless human tragedies over his long existence, had learned to observe with detached interest. But this small, brave child sitting at his counter, counting days of abandonment, broke through centuries of careful indifference. "I see," was all he could manage. After dinner, as the night deepened around the mansion, Nathaniel showed Abigail to one of the guest rooms. The space was impeccably maintained but sterile, lacking the touches that would make it suitable for a child. Still, Abigail gazed at the 4-poster bed and plush carpet with wide-eyed wonder. "This is all for me?" she asked, running her hand along the silk duvet. "For tonight, yes," Nathaniel said. He hesitated, then added, "The bathroom is through that door. There should be everything you need for a shower." While Abigail cleaned up, Nathaniel paced the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. "Jason, I require your assistance with a delicate matter," he said when his attorney answered. "Mr. Whitaker, it's nearly 10 o'clock, Jason Coleman replied, his voice thick with sleep. "I'm aware of the hour. This concerns a child. A pause. A child? What have you done? Nathaniel bristled at the implication. I've done nothing untoward. A young girl has appeared at my residence. She's been abandoned by her mother and has apparently been living on the streets. I need to understand the legal implications of her presence here. Jesus, Nathaniel, Jason sighed. You can't just keep a stray child. There are systems, protocols. I'm well aware. That's why I'm calling you instead of simply... Nathaniel trailed off, unwilling to voice the dark thought that had fleetingly crossed his mind. How easy it would be to simply make the problem disappear. I'll come by tomorrow morning, Jason said. Don't do anything until then, and for God's sake, call the authorities if she needs medical attention. She appears physically unharmed, merely hungry and tired. After hanging up, Nathaniel returned to find Abigail emerging from the bathroom, swimming in one of his t-shirts that she'd apparently found and appropriated as a nightgown. Her hair hung in damp ringlets around her face, and without the layer of dirt, she looked even younger and more vulnerable. Is this okay? She asked, plucking at the shirt. I didn't have pajamas. It's fine, he assured her. Are you comfortable? Do you need anything else? Abigail climbed into the massive bed, disappearing among the pillows. Will you stay? Just until I fall asleep. The request caught him off guard. I suppose I could. Nathaniel lowered himself stiffly into a chair near the bed. Abigail watched him with solemn eyes, her small hands clutching the duvet. My mom used to tell me stories, she said quietly. I'm not particularly skilled at storytelling. That's okay. You could just talk. About anything. Nathaniel considered this. Would you like to hear about Venice? The city on water? Abigail nodded eagerly, settling deeper into the pillows. I lived there many years ago, he began, careful to keep his narrative vague on dates. The buildings rise directly from the canals, their reflections dancing in the water. When fog rolls in from the sea, the entire city seems to float in the mist, suspended between water and sky. He continued speaking softly, describing the labyrinthine alleys and the way sunlight turned the Grand Canal to molten gold. Before long, Abigail's eyelids grew heavy, then closed completely, her breathing deepening into sleep. Nathaniel sat for a long while, studying her face. In slumber, the wariness that had lined her features melted away. She looked peaceful, trusting, dangerously so. He had promised her one day to pretend at humanity, at fatherhood. Then what? He rose silently and left the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. In his study, Nathaniel poured himself a glass of blood from his private reserve and stared out at the moonlit grounds. The night called to him, but for the first time in decades, he felt tethered to the house by the sleeping child within. His phone vibrated with a text from his sister, Rebecca. Rumors of unusual activity near your territory. Might be nothing. Stay vigilant. Nathaniel frowned. Rebecca rarely reached out unless the situation warranted concern. The vampire community maintained a delicate balance with the human world. Exposure meant destruction for them all, if others of his kind were drawing attention. A soft sound from the doorway interrupted his thoughts. Abigail stood there, barefoot and bleary-eyed. I had a bad dream, she murmured. Nathaniel hastily set aside his glass. You should return to bed. Can I stay with you for a little while? Her voice was small, fragile. Something in her expression made refusal impossible. Nathaniel gestured to the leather sofa near the fireplace. Very well, but only briefly. Abigail padded across the room and curled up on the sofa, tucking her feet beneath her. "What are you doing?" "Work," he answered vaguely. "Administrative matters." "For your job?" She yawned. "What do you do?" Nathaniel considered how to answer. "I manage properties, investments. It's quite dull." "Is that how you got this big house?" In a manner of speaking. He sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "My family has held certain assets for generations." Abigail nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "My mom worked at the hospital before she went away." "And your father?" Nathaniel asked gently. "I never met him." Her fingers picked at a loose thread on the sofa. "Mom said he wasn't ready to be a dad." "Some people aren't suited to parenthood," Nathaniel said, thinking of his own human father, centuries dead but never forgotten. A brutal man whose legacy Nathaniel had spent lifetimes trying to escape. "Do you have kids?" Abigail asked. The question pierced him unexpectedly. "No. My condition prevents it." "Are you sick?" "Not exactly." Nathaniel searched for words that wouldn't frighten her. "I have certain limitations that make a traditional family impossible." Abigail seemed to consider this. "But you're good at it. Being a dad, I mean." The simple statement left him speechless. Good at it? He'd done nothing but provide the most basic necessities: food, shelter, the bare minimum of comfort. And yet, in this child's eyes, that qualified as good parenting. The thought was both heartbreaking and infuriating. "You should try to rest," he said finally. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." "Will you still be my dad tomorrow?" Abigail asked, her eyes already drooping. Nathaniel felt that same crack widening in his carefully constructed walls. For tomorrow, yes. When she had fallen asleep again, Nathaniel carried her back to the guest room, her weight negligible in his arms. She didn't stir as he laid her down, only sighed and turned onto her side. Morning arrived with unwelcome brightness. Nathaniel, who had spent the night researching child welfare laws and missing persons reports, heard Abigail stirring around 7. He prepared a simple breakfast from his limited supplies: toast, fruit, and more orange juice, and was arranging it on a tray when she appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair tousled from sleep. "Good morning," he said formally. "Morning." She climbed onto the same bar stool as the previous night. "Are those for me?" "Unless you prefer something else. My pantry is regrettably understocked." "This is perfect," she assured him, reaching for a slice of toast. "What are we doing today?" The question hung between them. Nathaniel had promised her one day, this day, but Jason would be arriving soon, and with him, the intrusion of reality. "I thought perhaps we might visit the gardens," he said carefully. "The greenhouse contains some specimens you might find interesting." Abigail's face lit up. "Like a jungle?" "Of sorts. Many of the plants are tropical varieties that require special conditions to thrive in this climate." After breakfast, Nathaniel led her through the east wing of the mansion to the attached greenhouse. The glass structure gleamed in the morning sun, humid air fogging the panes. Inside, the atmosphere was dense and warm, heavy with the scent of earth and green growing things. "Wow," Abigail breathed, turning in a slow circle. Massive ferns brushed the ceiling, while orchids in impossible colors bloomed from hanging baskets. A small fountain trickled in the center, surrounded by moss-covered stones. "This is my sister's domain," Nathaniel explained. "Rebecca has always had an affinity for botanical pursuits." "You have a sister?" Abigail trailed her fingers along a broad, waxy leaf. Does she live here too? She visits occasionally. Rebecca prefers urban environments. Is she nice? Nathaniel's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Nice is not the first word that comes to mind when describing Rebecca. Formidable, perhaps. Brilliant, certainly. But she can be intimidating. Like you? Abigail asked innocently. Am I intimidating? Sometimes, but not in a scary way. More like, she scrunched her face in concentration, like you're a king or something. Nathaniel stilled. What an unusual comparison. You talk different, and you stand really straight. And sometimes you look at things like you're remembering stuff from a long time ago. Her perception was unnervingly accurate. Nathaniel had spent centuries perfecting his human camouflage, but this child had seen through it in less than a day. You're quite observant, he said. Their exploration of the greenhouse was interrupted by the mansion's doorbell. Nathaniel checked his watch. Jason was early. Wait here, he instructed Abigail. I need to speak with someone. Is it about me? Her voice had gone small again, that wariness returning to her eyes. Yes, Nathaniel answered honestly. But you needn't worry. I simply need to understand how best to help you. He found Jason in the foyer, briefcase in hand, looking harried despite the early hour. Where is she? Jason asked without preamble. In the greenhouse. I thought it best to speak privately first. Jason followed Nathaniel to the study, loosening his tie as he walked. I did some preliminary research last night. If the mother has been gone for 2 months, as you say, this could constitute abandonment under state law. And what does that mean for the child? It means she'll enter the foster system while attempts are made to locate the mother. Jason set his briefcase on the desk. I've contacted a colleague who specializes in family law. She's bringing a social worker, someone she trusts to be discreet. Nathaniel's expression darkened. You invited strangers to my home without consultation. This isn't like your usual problems, Nathaniel. I can't make a child disappear with legal maneuvering and large sums of money. There are protocols. When will they arrive? Within the hour. Jason studied Nathaniel's face. You seem unusually invested in this situation. The child is... Nathaniel struggled to articulate the strange connection he felt. She's resilient, resourceful. She's also a legal minefield, and frankly, you're the last person who should be responsible for a child. Nathaniel's eyes flashed dangerously. Explain. Jason held his ground, though his heartbeat quickened. Your lifestyle, your dietary requirements, the fact that you can't go out during daylight hours without extensive precautions. Need I continue? I'm well aware of my limitations, Nathaniel said coldly. I merely wish to ensure the child isn't subjected to further trauma. Then cooperate with the system. It exists to protect children. Before Nathaniel could respond, the study door creaked open. Abigail stood there, eyes wide with betrayal. You're sending me away, she said flatly. Not a question. Abigail, Nathaniel began, but she backed away. You promised. You said you'd be my dad for today. And I intend to keep that promise, he said, moving toward her slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. But we must also consider what happens after today. I know what happens, she said, voice rising. They'll put me in a home with strangers, and then different strangers, and then more strangers. I've heard the other kids talk. Jason cleared his throat. Actually, young lady, the goal would be to find you a permanent placement. I don't want a placement, Abigail shouted. I want to stay here, with him. The raw emotion in her voice reverberated through the room. Nathaniel felt it like a physical blow. In her eyes, he saw a reflection of his own ancient loneliness, the desperate hunger for belonging that transcended time and species. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we could discuss alternatives." Jason's expression turned alarmed. "Nathaniel, you can't possibly be considering—" "I'm considering all options," Nathaniel cut him off, "including temporary guardianship while we locate her mother. Temporary guardianship requires court approval, home studies, background checks, all of which can be expedited with the right connections," Nathaniel countered. "Isn't that why I retain your services, Jason? For your connections?" The attorney's mouth tightened into a thin line. "The social worker will need to interview Abigail. Alone." "I understand." Nathaniel turned to Abigail, kneeling to meet her eyes. "I need you to trust me. Will you speak with the social worker when she arrives? Tell her the truth about your situation?" Abigail's lower lip trembled. "Will you be there?" "Not during the interview, no. But I'll be nearby." "And you won't let them take me today?" Nathaniel hesitated, aware of Jason's scrutiny. "I will do everything in my considerable power to ensure you have a safe place to stay. That's all I can promise right now." It wasn't enough. He could see that in her face, but she nodded reluctantly. The social worker, Kimberly Grant, arrived 40 minutes later, accompanied by a family law attorney. Ms. Grant was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She requested use of the sunroom for her interview with Abigail, setting up a digital recorder and a notepad, while Nathaniel hovered anxiously in the doorway. "Mr. Whitaker," she said pointedly, "the interview needs to be private." "Of course." He looked at Abigail one last time. "I'll be in my study if you need anything." The waiting was excruciating. Nathaniel paced the study while Jason and the family attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena Vasquez, discussed legal options in low voices. His enhanced hearing could have allowed him to eavesdrop on Abigail's interview, but he refrained, respecting her privacy even as anxiety gnawed at him. Nearly an hour later, Ms. Grant appeared at the study door. "Mr. Whitaker, could we speak privately?" They walked to the library, where afternoon sun slanted through tall windows. Nathaniel carefully positioned himself in the shadow of a bookcase. "Abigail has had a difficult few months," Ms. Grant began. Based on her account, her mother left her with a neighbor, promising to return in a few days. When she didn't, the neighbor kept Abigail for several weeks before declaring she couldn't manage anymore. Rather than contact authorities, Abigail ran away. "Has there been any report of a missing child?" Nathaniel asked. "None that matches Abigail's description. She says her full name is Abigail Mitchell. Her mother is Margaret Mitchell, a nursing assistant at Mercy General Hospital. I've already called the hospital. Margaret Mitchell stopped showing up for work approximately 2 months ago. Her last known address was an apartment on Elm Street, but she was evicted for non-payment 3 months ago." "So the mother disappeared before abandoning the child," Nathaniel mused. "That suggests something may have happened to her." "It's possible," Ms. Grant agreed. "The police will need to investigate. In the meantime, Abigail needs placement. She wishes to stay here." Ms. Grant's expression softened slightly. "She made that very clear. She seems quite attached to you, Mr. Whitaker, despite the brevity of your acquaintance. May I ask why you're willing to consider taking responsibility for her? You're a single man with no childcare experience, living in an isolated location." Nathaniel weighed his words carefully. "I know what it is to be alone, Ms. Grant, to feel abandoned by those who should protect you. Abigail came to me because she sensed, somehow, that I would understand. I find I cannot simply turn her away. That's commendable but not sufficient reason to place a child in your care. What would be sufficient? He asked. Financial stability? I can provide that in abundance. A suitable environment? This house can be made child-friendly. Education? I can arrange private tutoring. What else would you require? It's not that simple. It can be, Nathaniel interrupted, allowing a hint of compulsion to enter his voice. Temporary emergency guardianship exists for precisely such situations. I have the resources to ensure Abigail's welfare while the search for her mother continues. Ms. Grant frowned, momentarily dazed by the subtle supernatural influence. I would need to conduct a home study, and you would need to be fingerprinted, background checked, all of which can be expedited, I'm sure. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the foyer. Raised voices, the slamming of a door. Nathaniel moved with inhuman speed to investigate, finding Jason confronting a news crew on the front steps. "This is private property," Jason was saying firmly. "You're trespassing." A reporter, young, ambitious, with a microphone thrust forward like a weapon, spoke over him. "We received an anonymous tip that Nathaniel Whitaker, the reclusive billionaire, has taken in a homeless child. Is Mr. Whitaker attempting to adopt? Has he notified proper authorities? The public has questions." Nathaniel stepped into the doorway, careful to remain in the shadow of the portico. "You will leave. Now." Something in his voice, the cold, deadly authority of centuries, made the reporter falter. But the cameraman kept filming. "Mr. Whitaker, is it true you're harboring a minor without legal authorization?" The reporter recovered, pushing forward. "My legal affairs are not your concern," Nathaniel said icily. "Remove yourselves from my property before I have you forcibly escorted off." "The public has a right to know." "Jason," Nathaniel cut in, "call security." As Jason reached for his phone, Ms. Grant appeared beside Nathaniel, her expression grave. "Where's Abigail?" A chill ran through him. "She should be in the sunroom." "She's not. I stepped out to speak with you, and when I returned..." Nathaniel was moving before she finished speaking, racing through the house at just below supernatural speed. "Abigail!" he called, checking each room. The sunroom was empty, the digital recorder still running on the table. The greenhouse, empty. The kitchen, empty. A faint scent caught his attention. Fear, adrenaline, the distinctive smell of Abigail's shampoo from that morning. He followed it to the rear of the house, through a rarely used door that led to the wooded grounds behind the estate. "She ran," he said when Jason found him. "She heard the commotion and fled." "The woods stretch for miles," Jason said, looking at the dense tree line with concern. "And it'll be dark in a few hours. I'll find her." Nathaniel's voice left no room for doubt. "Keep the social worker and that news crew occupied. Tell them Abigail is resting, and I've gone to make calls regarding her situation." "Nathaniel, if anything happens to that child..." "Nothing will happen to her," Nathaniel snapped. "She's under my protection now." As soon as Jason retreated, Nathaniel slipped into the woods, finally unleashing his true nature. His senses sharpened exponentially, the forest opening to him in layers of sound, scent, subtle movement. Abigail's trail was clear to him, the broken twigs and disturbed leaves forming a path only he could see. He moved with preternatural speed through the trees, following her panicked flight deeper into the forest. The sun was beginning its descent, shadows lengthening across the forest floor. Soon darkness would fall, his time his element, but also when the woods became truly dangerous for a lost child. Nearly a mile from the house, Nathaniel paused. Abigail's scent had changed, fear giving way to something else. Curiosity? He altered his course slightly, heading toward a small clearing where the trees thinned. There, in a patch of late afternoon sunlight, stood Abigail. She wasn't alone. A figure loomed over her, tall, unnaturally still, dressed in elegant dark clothing that belonged to another century. As Nathaniel approached, the figure turned, revealing a face of terrible beauty, pale as marble, with eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. "Nathaniel," the stranger greeted him, lips curving in a cold smile. "How careless of you, leaving such a delicious little morsel unattended." Abigail stood frozen, eyes wide with confusion and growing fear. "Nathaniel?" she whispered. "Step away from her, Victor," Nathaniel commanded, his voice resonating with power. Victor, an ancient vampire from the old world, known for his cruelty and disdain for human life, merely smiled wider. "But we were just becoming acquainted, weren't we, child?" "I don't like him," Abigail said, her voice small but steady. "He's scary." "Perceptive little thing," Victor mused. "She can sense what we are, Nathaniel, unusual in one so young." He reached out to touch Abigail's hair, and she flinched away. "I won't ask again," Nathaniel said, moving closer. The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. "Your sister sends her regards," Victor said casually. "She mentioned you'd acquired a pet. I had to see for myself." "Rebecca, of course." His sister's warning had been deliberate. She'd known Victor was coming and had wanted Nathaniel prepared. But she couldn't have known about Abigail. "This child is under my protection," Nathaniel stated, the formal declaration carrying weight in their ancient laws. Victor's expression hardened. "You invoke the old ways for a human child? Have you grown so sentimental in your advancing years?" "The old ways still bind you, regardless of my reasons." A tense silence stretched between them. Then Victor inclined his head slightly. Not submission, but acknowledgement. "Very well. Your claim is noted." His gaze shifted to Abigail. "For now." With unnatural speed, Victor vanished into the deepening shadows of the forest, leaving behind only the faint scent of ancient dust and something metallic. Abigail released a shuddering breath. Who was that man? Nathaniel knelt before her, checking her for injuries. "Someone dangerous. Someone you should never approach if you see him again." He took her small hands in his. "Abigail, why did you run away?" Her lower lip trembled. "I heard them talking about taking me away, and then those people with cameras came and I got scared." Tears welled in her eyes. "Are you mad at me?" "No," Nathaniel said softly. "But you frightened me. These woods aren't safe, especially as night falls." "I'm sorry." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I just didn't want to go with strangers again." Nathaniel felt something inside him breaking, the last remnants of his carefully maintained distance. This child, this fragile human with her impossible courage, had somehow breached defenses built over centuries. "Listen to me," he said, his voice gentle but urgent. "I promised you one day, and that day isn't over yet. But I need you to return to the house with me now. There are matters I must address, people I must speak with, if there's to be any hope of keeping you safe." "Safe with you?" Abigail asked, hope flickering in her eyes. Before Nathaniel could answer, a sound cut through the forest. Branches snapping, underbrush rustling, human searchers calling Abigail's name. The social worker must have alerted authorities. They're looking for you, Nathaniel said. We need to. A new scent reached him, familiar and unwelcome. Victor hadn't left after all. He was circling back, and he wasn't alone. Nathaniel could sense at least 2 other vampires moving through the trees, surrounding them. The sun had nearly set. In moments, the advantage would shift to the hunters. Abigail, Nathaniel said urgently, I need you to trust me completely right now. Can you do that? She nodded, eyes wide. I'm going to carry you, and we're going to move very fast, faster than you think possible. Close your eyes and hold tight to me. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, don't let go. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered. Nathaniel lifted her into his arms, and she wrapped herself around him, burying her face against his shoulder. He took a deep breath, gathering his power. Then he ran. Not human running, vampire speed, a blur through the darkening forest. Trees whipped past, branches scratching at his clothes. Behind them, he could hear the others in pursuit, gaining ground. The human search party was directly ahead, flashlight beams cutting through the growing darkness, voices calling Abigail's name. Nathaniel veered sharply east, away from them, toward the cliffs that overlooked the sea. Victor and his companions adjusted course, following. They were herding him, Nathaniel realized, driving him toward the cliff edge where he would have nowhere left to run. Abigail clung to him, trembling but silent as promised. Her trust was a tangible thing, a weight heavier than her physical form. The trees thinned, and suddenly they were at the cliff's edge. Below, waves crashed against jagged rocks, the last light of day glinting on the churning water. Nathaniel set Abigail down, positioning himself between her and the forest. Stay behind me, he instructed, no matter what happens. 3 figures emerged from the tree line. Victor in the center, flanked by 2 younger vampires. All 3 moved with the fluid grace of predators, spreading out to block any escape. How touching, Victor called. The mighty Nathaniel Whitaker, brought to bay for the sake of a human child. This is foolish, Victor, Nathaniel responded. You risk exposure. There are humans searching these woods. Humans who will find nothing but tragic accidents. Victor smiled. A reclusive billionaire and his young ward, lost in a fall from these treacherous cliffs. So sad, so final. Nathaniel felt Abigail's small hand slip into his. Her fingers were cold with fear, but her grip was steady. You would violate our most sacred law? Nathaniel asked. Risk the existence of all our kind for your petty grievances? My grievances are far from petty, Victor snarled, his facade of civility slipping. You've grown weak, Nathaniel, sentimental, unworthy of your position. The Eastern Seaboard deserves stronger leadership. The political angle clarified everything. This wasn't about Abigail at all. She was merely the catalyst, the excuse. Victor had been planning this coup for some time. If you wish to challenge me, Nathaniel said coldly, there are proper channels. I prefer the direct approach. Victor gestured to his companions. Take the child. Make it quick. The younger vampires moved forward. Nathaniel tensed, preparing for battle. He was older, stronger, but outnumbered, and hampered by the need to protect Abigail. A sound cut through the standoff, a helicopter, its searchlight sweeping the cliffs. The human search had escalated. Victor hissed in annoyance. Finish this now! As the vampires lunged forward, Nathaniel made his decision. He turned, scooping Abigail into his arms. Hold tight, he whispered, and trust me. Then he stepped backward off the cliff. Abigail clutched to his chest, just as the helicopter's searchlight illuminated the spot where they had stood. The last thing Nathaniel heard before the wind rushed past them was Abigail's startled gasp, not of fear, but of wonder. The wind whipped her hair as they plummeted toward the churning ocean below, but instead of screaming, Abigail tightened her grip around Nathaniel's neck. His body twisted in midair, positioning himself beneath her as they fell, his back to the waves. "I've got you," he whispered against her ear, his voice somehow carrying despite the roaring air. Always. The impact never came. Instead, Nathaniel's form shifted beneath her, his shoulders broadening impossibly, his spine elongating, massive wings like those of an ancient bat, but spanning 15 feet, erupted from his back. They caught the air with a thunderous snap, turning their deadly plunge into a controlled glide over the midnight waters. Abigail's breath caught in her throat. Through the thin fabric of her sweater, she felt Nathaniel's chest rumble with effort as his wings beat powerfully against the coastal winds. Above them, shouts of rage echoed from the cliff's edge, followed by the sound of pursuit. Victor and his followers transforming as well, their silhouettes dark against the moon as they gave chase. The helicopter's searchlight swept wildly, trying to track the impossible shapes moving through the night sky. "They won't follow us into the city," Nathaniel said, banking sharply toward the distant lights of Boston. "Too many witnesses." Abigail clung to him, her face pressed against his chest. "You can fly," she whispered, a mixture of awe and understanding in her voice. "The bats in your study, they weren't just decorations." "One of the older gifts," he replied, his wings beating steadily. "Not all of us retain it. Victor can't maintain this form for long. He's too young." The pursuit began to fall away as they approached the outskirts of the city. The helicopter had turned back, its operators likely questioning their sanity. Only Victor remained doggedly on their trail, his wing beats becoming increasingly labored. "He's going to follow us home," Abigail said, glancing back. "No," Nathaniel's voice hardened. "We're not going home. Not yet." He banked again, heading toward the gleaming towers of downtown Boston. The lights of the city reflected off his pale skin, making him look more otherworldly than ever. "I'm taking you somewhere safe, somewhere Victor won't dare to follow." The somewhere safe turned out to be the 42nd floor of a glass and steel skyscraper. Nathaniel landed on a wide balcony with practiced ease, his wings folding and then seeming to melt back into his body. The transformation left his shirt in tatters, but he ignored it as he set Abigail gently on her feet. "Rebecca's penthouse," he explained, tapping a complex pattern on the glass door. "My sister." The door slid open almost immediately, revealing a striking woman with the same pale complexion and penetrating eyes as Nathaniel. She wore silk pajamas and a look of profound irritation that softened when she saw Abigail. "You brought a child to my home," Rebecca stated, stepping aside to let them enter. "And Victor Blackwood is hunting you. I can smell his rage on the wind." "We need sanctuary," Nathaniel said. "Just until dawn." Rebecca's gaze lingered on Abigail, who stood shivering despite the warm night. "The council will convene over this. You know that, don't you?" "Let them," Nathaniel replied. "Victor moved against me first. He threatened what's mine." Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly at the possessive tone, but she merely nodded. "The guest rooms are prepared, as always." The next hours passed in a blur for Abigail. Rebecca provided her with clean clothes that were mysteriously her exact size, and a hot meal that she devoured despite her lingering fear. Nathaniel spent much of the time on the phone, speaking in hushed tones with people he referred to only as allies. Rebecca watched the sky from her balcony, occasionally reporting the movements of dark shapes circling the building. "They won't attack here," she assured Abigail. "Too many of our kind have investments in this building. It would violate too many territorial agreements." By dawn, Nathaniel had formulated a plan. "We can't go back to the estate," he told Abigail as they sat in Rebecca's kitchen. "Victor's made his move, but he's overplayed his hand. Threatening a human child, my ward, violates our most fundamental laws of discretion." "So what happens now?" Abigail asked, clutching a mug of hot chocolate between her palms. "Now," Nathaniel said, "we use the human legal system to our advantage. Jason Coleman has been preparing the adoption paperwork for weeks. We're going to accelerate the process." Rebecca, leaning against the kitchen counter, shook her head. "The council won't like you exposing yourself to that much scrutiny." "The council can either support me or face the consequences of Victor's actions," Nathaniel replied. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. "Jason's waiting downstairs with a car. We need to move quickly." The courthouse was imposing, all granite and marble columns, with wide steps leading to heavy wooden doors. Abigail had never felt smaller than when she climbed those steps, Nathaniel's hand steady on her shoulder. Jason Coleman met them at the entrance, his briefcase bulging with documents. "Judge Harriman agreed to hear us immediately," Jason said, leading them through security. "But there's a complication. The Department of Children's Services has assigned a caseworker, Kimberly Grant. She's waiting inside and she's skeptical." Nathaniel's expression remained impassive. "Skeptical of what?" "Of everything," Jason replied. "Your suitability as a guardian, the speed of the process, the lack of background on Abigail. She's done her homework, and she's found the gaps in our story." The courtroom was smaller than Abigail had expected, more like a conference room with a raised desk at one end where the judge would sit. A woman in a charcoal suit stood when they entered, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes sharp with suspicion. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Kimberly Grant, representing the Department of Children's Services." Nathaniel shook her hand briefly. "Ms. Grant, I understand you have concerns." "Several," she confirmed. "Not least of which is how a child who was never reported missing ended up in your care." Before Nathaniel could respond, the side door opened and Judge Harriman entered, a white-haired woman with piercing blue eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Everyone rose as she took her seat. "This is highly irregular," the judge began, reviewing the papers before her. "Mr. Coleman, you're requesting an emergency adoption hearing with minimal notice and expedited processing. Explain." Jason stepped forward. "Your Honor, my client has been caring for Abigail Mitchell for several months following the disappearance of her mother. Recent events have made formalizing this arrangement urgent for the child's safety and well-being." "And these recent events are?" the judge prompted. Jason hesitated, clearly unsure how to explain vampire politics to a human court. "Threats have been made against the child," Nathaniel interjected smoothly. "I believe these threats are connected to the circumstances of her mother's disappearance." Kimberly Grant stepped forward. "Your Honor, if threats exist, the proper course is police involvement and potentially protective custody with the state, not rushed adoption by a man with no prior relationship to the child's family." "That's not true," Abigail said suddenly, her voice small but clear in the formal room. All eyes turned to her. "He did know my mom." The judge's expression softened slightly. "Young lady, Would you like to tell us about that? Abigail nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. My mom used to work at Mr. Whitaker's house. She was a housekeeper there years ago, before I was born. She always said he was a good man. This was news to Nathaniel, whose surprise flickered briefly across his face before his composure returned. He'd never connected Abigail to any former employee. The Mitchell surname was common enough, and he'd had dozens of housekeepers over the decades. Is this true, Mr. Whitaker? The judge asked. I employ many staff members, Your Honor, Nathaniel replied carefully. I don't recall Margaret Mitchell specifically, but it's certainly possible. Kimberly Grant seized on this. So you admit you have no meaningful connection to this child or her family? Your Honor, this case has too many red flags. We have no death certificate for the mother, no formal guardianship transfer, and Mr. Whitaker's background check shows concerning gaps. Gaps? The judge inquired. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Whitaker appears to have extensive holdings and investments dating back decades, but almost no personal history. No birth certificate on file in any state, no school records, no employment history before his current business ventures. A tense silence fell over the courtroom. Abigail felt her heart pounding. She'd never considered that Nathaniel's immortal nature would create paper trail problems in the human world. I maintain my privacy carefully, Your Honor, Nathaniel said. My family has always valued discretion. Privacy is one thing, Mr. Whitaker. Complete absence of documented existence is another. The judge frowned. Ms. Grant raises valid concerns. Your Honor, Jason interjected. My client's personal documentation is not the issue here. The welfare of the child is paramount, and Abigail has been thriving in Mr. Whitaker's care. Has she? Kimberly challenged. Because our preliminary investigation shows she hasn't been enrolled in school, has no medical records since entering his care, and appears to be isolated from normal social interactions. Abigail felt tears welling in her eyes. Everything was falling apart. The life she'd begun to build with Nathaniel, the safety she'd found, all of it threatened not by vampires, but by human bureaucracy. I don't want to go, she whispered, but her voice carried in the quiet room. Please don't make me leave. The judge sighed. I understand your attachment, young lady, but the court must consider what's best for you long term. I know what's best for me, Abigail insisted, her voice stronger now. My mom is gone. She's not coming back. I lived on the streets for months before Mr. Whitaker found me. No one else wanted me. No one else even saw me. Kimberly's expression softened slightly. Abigail, there are many families who would love to provide you with a stable home. I have a stable home, Abigail countered, and I'm not leaving it. The judge raised her hand for silence. Mr. Whitaker, what exactly are your intentions regarding this child? Nathaniel stood slowly, his presence commanding the room without effort. For a moment, Abigail feared he might use his supernatural abilities to influence the proceedings, something he'd explained was possible but forbidden except in dire emergencies. Instead, he simply spoke the truth. When I found Abigail, she was half-starved and sleeping in the garden of my estate, he said quietly. She had been abandoned by every system meant to protect her. I took her in because it was the right thing to do. I continue to care for her because she has become... He paused, searching for the right word. Important to me. Important how? The judge pressed. Nathaniel's gaze met Abigail's, and in that moment, something shifted between them, an understanding that transcended their unusual circumstances. She is the daughter I never had, he said finally, "and I will protect her with everything I possess." The simple declaration hung in the air. Even Kimberly Grant seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The judge studied Nathaniel carefully. "These threats you mentioned, can you elaborate?" "There are individuals who resent my position and influence," Nathaniel replied carefully. "They believe targeting Abigail is a way to harm me." "Then perhaps separation would be safer for her," Kimberly suggested. "No." Nathaniel's voice hardened. "Separation would leave her vulnerable. I have resources and capabilities that ensure her protection." The judge leaned back, considering. "This is highly irregular. Without proper documentation of the mother's status or a pre-existing legal relationship, I'm not inclined to grant an immediate adoption." Abigail felt her world crumbling. She reached for Nathaniel's hand, clinging to it like a lifeline. "However," the judge continued, "I'm also reluctant to remove a child from a stable environment without clear evidence of endangerment." She tapped her pen thoughtfully against her desk. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm granting temporary legal guardianship to Mr. Whitaker for 90 days. During that time, Ms. Grant will conduct weekly home visits. Mr. Whitaker, you will enroll Abigail in an appropriate school, schedule a complete medical examination, and provide any additional documentation my clerk requests." She fixed Nathaniel with a stern look. "And you will cooperate fully with the investigation into Margaret Mitchell's disappearance. If she is deceased, we need to document that properly. If not, her parental rights remain intact." "I understand, Your Honor," Nathaniel said, relief evident in his voice despite the stipulations. "After 90 days, we'll reconvene to evaluate permanent placement." The judge's gaze softened as she looked at Abigail. "Young lady, you'll have a voice in that decision. But for now, this arrangement gives everyone time to ensure your best interests are truly being served." With a rap of her gavel, the hearing concluded. Abigail remained frozen, processing what had just happened. They hadn't won completely, but they hadn't lost either. She still had a home, at least for now. Outside the courtroom, Kimberly Grant approached them. "I'll be conducting the first home visit tomorrow afternoon," she said, "and Mr. Whitaker, I'll need access to all areas of the residence." Nathaniel nodded. "Of course." After she departed, Jason pulled Nathaniel aside. "We need to talk about the mother," he murmured. "If she's truly missing rather than deceased, this gets complicated." "She's gone," Abigail said flatly, overhearing them. "She left me at a bus station in Springfield with $20 and a note saying she couldn't take care of me anymore. That was almost a year ago." Both men stared at her, surprised by this new information. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nathaniel asked gently. Abigail shrugged, studying the marble floor. "I was ashamed. I thought if you knew she didn't want me, maybe you wouldn't either." Nathaniel knelt before her, bringing himself to her eye level, a gesture he rarely made, given his usual dignified bearing. "Abigail, listen to me. Your mother's choices don't define your worth. Nothing could make me not want you in my life." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside her. For months she had held herself together, surviving on the streets, then adapting to life with Nathaniel, always afraid to fully trust that this new safety was real. Now, in the echoing hallway of the courthouse, surrounded by strangers rushing past, Abigail finally allowed herself to cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd sometimes shed at night, but deep, racking sobs that bent her double. Nathaniel caught her as her knees buckled, gathering her against his chest as she wept for everything she'd lost and everything she feared losing still. "I've got you," he whispered, echoing his words from their fall off the cliff. "Always." Jason discreetly stepped away, giving them privacy in the public space. Around them, the business of the courthouse continued, but Nathaniel remained kneeling on the hard floor, holding Abigail until her sobs subsided into hiccups. "What about Victor?" she asked finally, her voice hoarse. "And the counsel?" "Victor has already been contained," Nathaniel said. "Rebecca messaged during the hearing. His challenge failed when he violated our laws of discretion. As for the counsel," he sighed, "they're displeased but will adapt. They always do." "Will we really go back to the house, with everything that happened?" Nathaniel nodded. "It's our home, and now we have legal standing to protect it. And you." The next 90 days transformed their lives in ways neither had anticipated. Nathaniel's home underwent subtle changes to appear more suitable for a child. His ancient artifacts carefully secured, his more obvious vampire accommodations disguised. Abigail started at a private school where her intelligence quickly became apparent, though her social adjustment remained challenging. Kimberly Grant's weekly visits evolved from tense inspections to something almost cordial. She remained professionally skeptical, but couldn't deny Abigail's improved health and evident attachment to Nathaniel. The vampire community kept its distance, respecting Nathaniel's authority, but clearly uncomfortable with his increasingly public life. Only Rebecca visited regularly, developing an unexpected bond with Abigail over late-night chess games and stories of Nathaniel's distant past. When they returned to court 90 days later, the atmosphere was entirely different. Judge Harriman reviewed the thick folder of reports, school records, and medical evaluations with evident satisfaction. "Ms. Grant, your assessment?" she asked. Kimberly stood. "While I maintain that this is an unconventional placement, I cannot deny that Abigail is thriving in Mr. Whitaker's care. He has met or exceeded every requirement set by the court." "And the matter of Margaret Mitchell?" "Police reports confirm she purchased a one-way bus ticket to California 11 months ago. There's been no activity on her social security number or known accounts since then. The investigation remains open, but—" Kimberly glanced at Abigail apologetically. "There's no indication she intends to return." The judge nodded solemnly. "Abigail, do you have anything you wish to say before I make my ruling?" Abigail stood, her posture more confident than it had been 3 months earlier. "Just that I've found my home, and I'd like to stay there." "Mr. Whitaker?" Nathaniel rose, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Your Honor, I came into Abigail's life by chance. I stayed in it by choice. I ask the court to formalize what has already become true in every way that matters, that she is my daughter, and I am her father." Judge Harriman smiled for the first time in either hearing. "Based on the evidence presented and the clear bond between you, I am granting the petition for adoption. Abigail Mitchell is hereby legally recognized as the daughter of Nathaniel Whitaker, with all rights and responsibilities thereof." The gavel struck with finality, the sound echoing in Abigail's chest like a heartbeat. She turned to Nathaniel, who stood perfectly still, his immortal composure finally breaking as a single crimson tear traced down his pale cheek. Outside, autumn sunlight filtered through clouds, casting the courthouse steps in a gentle glow. Nathaniel donned his wide-brimmed hat and gloves, protection against the daylight that, while not fatal as myths suggested, weakened his kind significantly. "What happens now?" Abigail asked as they descended toward the waiting car. "Now," Nathaniel said, We go home, and we have all the time in the world. As they reached the bottom step, a familiar figure separated from the crowd. Victor Blackwood, diminished from his defeat, but still dangerous, his eyes gleaming with malice. "This isn't over, Nathaniel," he hissed, low enough that only they could hear. "The child has made you vulnerable. One day, Nathaniel cut him off, you will learn that what you perceive as weakness is actually my greatest strength." His hand rested protectively on Abigail's shoulder. "Until then, remember that she is under my protection, and I have eternity to enforce it." Victor's face twisted with hatred, but he retreated, melting back into the crowd of humans, oblivious to the ancient power walking among them. In the car, Abigail leaned against Nathaniel's shoulder. "He's still afraid of you." "With good reason," Nathaniel replied. Then, more gently, "Are you afraid? After everything you've seen?" Abigail considered the question seriously. She had witnessed impossible things, learned terrible truths, faced dangers no child should face. Yet here she was, claimed and protected, finally belonging somewhere after so long adrift. "No," she said finally. "I'm not afraid anymore." As the car pulled away from the courthouse, she caught a glimpse of bats circling the building's tower, unusual in daylight. They seemed to follow the car briefly before dispersing into the autumn sky, their wings catching the sunlight like tiny guardians seeing them safely home.